Hey 6th graders, remember that each day we spend 15 minutes on MobyMax completing our language lesson, so if you have not done that yet, pause the video and make sure you get that completed. So far we have heard two personal narratives, Crown Point and Rattlesnake Mesa by Edna New Ryder Weber. As their titles suggest, both narratives are about important places in the author's life. So, throughout our personal narrative unit, we are keeping notes about what makes something a personal narrative. So far we have personal narratives tell a true story from the author's own life, describe events in which the author learns or changes, but I just added a third thing. It can be about important places in the author's life. We know this is true because the first chapter of the personal narrative we are reading is about Crown Point, which is a boarding school that Edna went to, and the second chapter that we've heard is about Rattlesnake Mesa, which is a place where she and her friends carved into the rocks over the summer. Today, we will read part of another personal narrative by this author in which she describes a memorable event. So now I just added a fourth thing to our notes, which is that personal narratives can be about memorable events. As I read, I want you to listen and think about what the author learned from this memorable event. On a rare occasion, my Aunt Elizabeth would serve a great delicacy to the boarding school students, baked prairie dog. My uncle, father, friends, and some students would stage a prairie dog hunt early on a Saturday morning. They'd be gone 7 or 8 hours, returning with plenty for a wonderful Sunday meal. These little animals are vegetarians. They live in large colonies called dog towns, really burrows underground. As soon as the men unloaded the truck of burlap bags filled with prairie dogs, the assistant cooks and kitchen helpers, who had been impatiently waiting, would go to work, skinning, gutting, and cleaning them, having a fine time butchering. Nane, Little Fat, and I watched, with Auntie telling us, "Stand back, don't get too close." Soon there'd be a big heap of yellowish-brown fur and entrails piled on a large canvas, which the big boys carried away and buried. My auntie orchestrated this whole performance. Do, don't, yes, no. She'd have the kitchen detail wash, dry, oil, and salt the carcasses, then carefully lay them on their backs, row after row, in large, heavy baking trays. These trays were put into coolers until early Sunday morning, at which time they were slid into the big ovens to bake. The students looked forward to this meal with great anticipation. As Sunday noon approached, Nane, Little Fat, and I would appear at the back door to the kitchen. Auntie, on seeing us, would call out, come in, sit over there, out of the way." Whenever they had the prairie dog feast at the boarding school, we would come over for the festivities. It was like a big celebration of native food, everyone in high spirits looking forward to this special meal. Mr. Ains from the bakery would make dried fruit pies for the occasion. This was better than Thanksgiving. The cooks bustled around, mashing potatoes, making gravy. The kitchen detail checking things in the dining hall, making sure everything was in place. Then it was time. Tray after tray of juicy, succulent prairie dog came out of the big, hot ovens, roasted to a crispy golden brown. They looked delicious, smelling like slow-roasted chicken. Exquisite in their rows. They still had their little heads, their little legs stuck straight up in the air. Nane and Little Fat left me to go eat in the dining hall with the students. I appreciated this sumptuous meal, but I just couldn't eat it. You see, I had a pet prairie dog. It would have been like eating my own little pet. No thanks. My auntie laughed at me, saying, "You don't know what you're missing." And that was fine with me. After reading this story, we are going to discuss a question in class with our table partners. The question is, what does Edna learn or realize from this experience? What she learns is that she has a really big heart and she's sensitive, and she couldn't eat something that she had as a pet, even if it's a really special native meal. The author makes this real to us by adding lots of details. So on page 41, I'll reread one of the parts. It says, exquisite in their little rows. They still had their little heads, their little legs stuck straight up in the air. So to help make this experience real to us, the author added these details so we can see what she was seeing, and that's that the prairie dogs still look like prairie dogs, and all she could see was her pet. Just like our story demonstrated today, good personal narratives include sensory and descriptive details that help the reader imagine what is happening. So in our notes, I just added that personal narratives use sensory and descriptive details. If you want to add that to your list if you're keeping one, that's definitely something that you can do. Now I want you to open up your notebooks to the early memories that you've listed over the past few days. You're going to choose one of those memories and imagine it as I ask you the questions that you see on the screen. What is happening in this memory? Where is it happening? What does it look like around you? What sounds do you hear? What do you smell? What do you see moving? How is it moving? After you have a chance to think about these things for the memory that you chose, you're going to discuss them in your table groups. After we finish this, you're going to open up your language arts notebook to the draft section, and you are going to try writing a true story about an experience from your own life. You can continue a piece you started earlier or start a new one. You can pick an idea that you have in your language arts notebook, or if you have a new one in mind, you can use that. But what I want you to try today is using that great sensory and descriptive details. Make sure you keep everything we have learned so far about personal narratives in mind as you write today.